This is going to be a fun show. If you are a Game of Thrones fan or Star Wars, you are going to love the guest that we are going to have on today. Let's get the name right. Miltos Yerolemou.
Yes, you got it right the first time.
Yerolemou!
Awesome.
If you don't remember the name, he's the sword fighting expert who taught Arya how to fight in
Game of Thrones.
Yes, Game of Thrones for season 2011, I think was when it aired. And he played Syrio. He was on Star Wars after that, so that's cool.
He was, which is, gosh, I actually haven't seen The Force Awakens.
Honestly, don't know if I have.
Nobody hate me.
But he's going to be on our show today. A really nice guy coming from the United Kingdom, and we're going to get a chance to chat with him and ask him all sorts of cool Game of Thrones and Star Wars questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be fun. That's right, in depth, hard-hitting journalism.
Yes.
So stick around.
And it's best.
We're going to be right back.
So is Louis normally a part of your calls?
He is. People don't really know because when the phone rings, he has this instinctive reaction to leap into my lap and howl. And sometimes he does it without howling, but he always leaps into my lap and does what you just saw him do. And now he's just a little bit further down, so you can't see him. But he's constantly needing reassurance that, who knows, he's a neurotic dog. So
he's an only child.
So, yeah, he really is.
Oh my goodness. Now, are you coming to us from London, or what part do you live in?
I am. I'm in London. I do live in Bristol, but I am currently in London, the run up to Christmas. So I'm seeing friends, and I'm here at my partner's place. So, so I am. That's why I don't have my normal things like my, tripod and my laptop and all the things that will mean that I'm a little bit moving around because I'm holding it in my hand, but it'll be fine.
Yeah, no, it's fine. We're very relaxed here, so no worries.
I'm just concerned for 3 hours, your hand's going to get tired holding the phone.
You're going to have like one good size arm and then the other arm.
That's true.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're with Miltos Yerolemou.
Did you say that right?
Yeah, did I even come close to pronouncing your name?
No. I have to say that the Americans always have no trouble pronouncing my surname. But it's not so good with British people. British people really struggle with it.
Really?
Yeah, I get "you're a lemon" that a lot.
I love that.
Whatever. Yeah, seriously.
Oh my goodness, that is great.
I like that. You're a lemon.
So we're going to dive back into some of your early days. And then the challenges that maybe you face or the steps you took to become what the rest of the world knows you for today. Once it was your overnight success, that
I love it. Yes, I love it.
So what made you decide not to do official, I guess, at the university and learn the craft, but do it hands-on through the stage? So how did that go for you?
So I guess I should talk to you about where I really came from. So both my parents are Greek Cypriots. They came to the country at the same time when I was born. My mum was heavily pregnant with me when she was arriving on the shores of the UK. And my parents come from farming background. They've returned. I mean, they took early retirement. They had a restaurant for about 25 years and then returned to Cyprus. So they're back home in the village where they grew up. And they have an olive farm, and that's really my background. And so, and I grew up in a very provincial seaside town in Eastbourne, in the UK. And my only real experience of drama was doing it at school. And I didn't know any actors. I certainly didn't think that I wanted to be an actor. I didn't think that was something that people like me did. And certainly my parents weren't that supportive of that because, being good traditional Greek parents, they wanted me to get a nice, stable, secure job. and settle down and, kind of have a very kind of pretty straightforward life.
Now,
Right.
did you actually know what you wanted to do, even though when you kind of started not even thinking about doing acting? Is that
No, I
how?
didn't think about acting. I did do a play when I was 9 years old. My very first experience of acting was me doing a little mime show as a 9-year-old. It was called The Clockwork Policeman, and I played the Clockwork Policeman, and I got to show off my body popping skills. and and that was my first taste of performing.
I want to see a video of
I
that.
know.
I
Did
want
you
a video.
just, oh yeah, I got to do this? Or were you
Yeah,
like completely fearful?
no, I didn't think twice about it. It was something that came quite naturally for me, but not because I was an extrovert. I wouldn't consider myself that at all. But I really did struggle at school. I kind of felt like a fish out of water, and I didn't really get on very well at school. Wasn't particularly academic, not because I wasn't clever, although that's always debatable. It's relative, isn't it? Whether you're clever or not. But I really struggled because it was one of those things. I really felt like I didn't know what I was doing at school, and that continued all the way through until I was about 16. But the one thing that connected me to school was doing plays and doing school plays. And it was one place where I felt confident. And if it wasn't for that, I would have had a terrible time at school, really. Um, but that was where I got the bug. But not for 1 second did I think, oh, I'm going to be an actor. It was just a hobby. But because I really didn't know what to do, and I'd been working at my dad's restaurant, as you can imagine, as a child, and all through my teenage years, that by the time I got to 18, I was like, there is no way I'm going to take over this restaurant and run it for 25 years, because it was hard work.
Yeah.
And I admire my mum and dad for the amount of work that they put in, but it was full time. And they didn't take days off, and they were dedicated to that place and worked really, really hard. I wasn't that kind of person. By the time I got to 18, I was ready to retire. But I was going to try and make them proud, so I thought I'd go and study law at university.
Ooh.
But as a really good friend of mine said, do not do that, because you'll be terrible at it. You're not at all academic. If you're going to go and get a degree, at least go and do something that you love. And that's where I went and did a performing arts degree in performing arts. A
Oh.
bachelor of arts degree, should I say, in performing arts. And that is the beginning of the end as far as my relationship with my parents. I did do that degree, and I met some amazing people who are fantastic, brilliant directors and actors and comedians who are doing really well to this day. And that's kind of the first time I started to formulate an idea of maybe being a performer or an actor.
And
And
your
that really was the beginning of it. Yeah.
That's
Wow.
cool. And your parents now have accepted you as, professional actor. Are they trying to like, hey, you're going to get us in the show so we can see the behind the scenes? They're probably really loving it now, right?
My mother is incredibly skeptical of
Oh,
my whole lifestyle. But she's my mother, and I don't resent my parents for the way that they've reacted to my career. My mother just wanted me to be happy and to just have some sort of security. But for as well as I do, in both America and the UK, this idea of having a job for life and the security that it's supposed to,
oh yeah.
promise you doesn't really exist in 2019. So everyone is in the same boat. It's not just
Oh, yeah.
self-employed actors. We're all in the same boat. So but I did, while I was still at university, my dear friend Justin Chadwick, who directed films like The Other Berlin Girl and Idris Elba in the Mandela biopic. He was at university with me, and he made a short movie. And this was all based on them spending a summer while in between semesters at college with my dad, and he made a movie, and we managed to get my dad in this short movie.
Oh.
And as you can see, my dog is stop it.
He's just making sure you still remember him.
Either that or Louis wants in your next film.
And we managed to get my dad in this movie, and I was insistent, do not get my dad in this movie. He will not. He doesn't know anything about movies. He can barely talk to me. My partner's just come home. And we managed to get my dad in this movie. And Ewan McGregor, this is just after he'd filmed Trainspotting, but before he really launched his career. He was playing the lead in this short movie, and my dad was in this movie, and it was remarkable because he was really good.
Wow.
He was really good, and he was the dark horse of the family, someone who was very resistant to me being an actor, but when he was given the opportunity, he was fantastic. And so my dad went to the premiere. It was only a short movie, but they, my friend really went to town and made sure that they showed it, on the big screen in the West End in London. And my dad turned up, with my sister. I was at college, so I couldn't attend anyway. I was far away. But my dad loved it, and he saw a different side and really understood things in a very different way. So he got on my side after that.
Aw, that's really.
But as my mother said, "Oh my God, now we've got two of them in the family." So yeah.
Oh,
She's gonna get in trouble. She's
Yeah.
like, don't encourage him, honey. No, please.
So try to fill the big acting shoes of your dad now.
Yeah.
Once you, once you had graduated and moved on to say, okay, now this is my profession. What were some of the, early days and roles or auditions like for you?
So I graduated, and I was in a place where I really didn't know what I was going to do. You spend 3 years studying and working with a group of people that you grow very close to, almost like I think there was about 20 of us. Mm-hmm. And we worked together, we made plays, we did classes together, we saw each other every day, and we were really like a little team, a little group. And when that finishes, you kind of feel quite desolate. And I'm sure people, when they finish their courses, whether you're doing performing arts or any other subject, you finish this, you're in this kind of protective environment at college. And then it's like, well, now what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And I found it very daunting. And the first thing I did is that I went to a job agency and got a job as a landscape gardener. But it wasn't really a landscape gardener. That's how they sold it. They wanted someone who didn't mind working outside and who had a car because it was out of the city. What it actually was tending a Polish cemetery. I was actually a glorified gravedigger. And that was my very first job after I graduated.
Oh my gosh. When you found out, were you like, nah, no.
I was like, I think I can do this. I was in that place where I was like, anything to stop me from worrying about what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I mean, I only did it for a few weeks, and but it was quite an experience. And the people I worked with, had some amazing stories. And I was tending the cemetery. I didn't really have to bury people. The more experienced people did that, but I was in charge of. I did scatter ashes once for a family. So that was the first thing I did.
The wind blowing hard that day? Because I could just imagine it.
They're a part of you still to this day.
Yeah. I'm not going to go into too much detail about those things. But
out of beer.
Yeah.
So
Jim Grammy's like, I want that out of there.
Is there? I went to London and I auditioned for a theatre company. It wasn't for any money. It was a profit share company. This was probably about 1992, 93. And I got a job with this company. There was only 5 of us, and they'd already done a very successful tour of Poland. Uh, Kind of interesting, kind of symmetry there with the cemetery I worked in. But I worked for them. We devised, and I worked for them for about 5 years, and they were called Might and Main, and we did some amazing work together. We earned no money. We traveled around in an old newspaper van. There was 6 of us all together, up and down the country, from the Hebrides, the islands of Scotland, all the way down to Cornwall.
Wow.
And I kind of felt like I learnt my craft there. We worked with people, choreographers and dancers from companies like DV8,
Mhm.
which were really at the forefront of performance at that time, crossover between drama and dance. And I was always really attracted to dance. It was something that I probably from the
Since
very
9.
first time I did
Yeah.
the Clockwork Policeman. But I had a natural aptitude, in the same way that later on in my career, learning fight choreography, the same thing,
Yeah.
the same part of your brain if you can process a dance choreography, it's the same thing. So I had a natural aptitude. I could be shown moves and I could replicate them. So even though I didn't have any dancing experience, but it was the thing that I was the most excited about, and the thing that I really threw myself in, and I really enjoyed it. There was something so exciting about dancing, even if it was I wouldn't say it was classical dance. It was more modern stroke acrobatic, but it was something that, it was also the challenge of it, having to learn something that was actually quite difficult to do. It wasn't just reciting lines or interpreting character. It was something you had to kind of train to do. So I really enjoyed that, and I learned a lot over those 4 years, 5 years that I was with them.
I mean, I want to go now. I don't know if they're still in production or still do that, because I'm like I'm so intrigued. I actually want to do it now.
She has
You should check out,
background.
if you haven't come across DV8, you should check them out online, because they still perform. Um,
I'm writing that down right now.
and
I don't know
you
spelling it
will
right,
see videos of shows that they have done in the past, and even the videos of the live performances are really impressive. They're really impressive.
I bet the way you make it sounds really awesome.
Yeah, so she can dance. I have no rhythm at all. So, in fact, we were listening to some intro music for us, and I was kind of moving along to it. She goes, "You just ruined that
She's
song
ruined
for
it
me."
for me,
So
yeah.
we couldn't use it as an intro for our show because of that. So, how do you make the transition from dancing and acting on stage to all of a sudden I'm on a television series?
Because auditioning there is, I don't know if it's different than auditioning here.
We have cattle calls here, so yeah. So when you were, just people.
I
Yes,
don't
of
even know if
course,
you have
cattle
to
calls.
call
Yeah, we call it cattle call because it just looks like cattle coming in, just one after the other, here in Oklahoma, in the United States.
No, we do the same thing here, especially for musicals. For musicals, when they're looking for dancers and a particular kind of look or a particular kind of style, they will do cattle call auditions. Or if they're looking for children, of course. But I got myself an agent, and I started doing what I would call legitimate theatre, as in working in a theatre and being paid a weekly wage.
Wow.
And all of that, which was, after 5 years of living hand to mouth, it was really like, I felt I've made it. I finally made it.
That was your big
200,
Yeah,
£250 a week, and I was like, this is it. I've made it.
you got paid.
I know, and it was a big deal in those days. And I started to do, I was as a character actor, doing parts in plays and in Shakespeare, and that's when I started to really fall in love with Shakespeare. As I told you before, I wasn't particularly academic when I was at school, but once I started understanding it and performing it, it really connected with me, and I was really excited. I love the challenge of it. I love trying to,
Decipher.
interpret it
Yeah.
and make it you know, and find new ways of making language which is hundreds of years old relevant and connect, you know, with audiences today. And that's a bit of a challenge in itself, but I like that challenge.
Oh yeah, trying
Um,
to tell an academic scholar to actually try and interpret Shakespeare, and I'm sure they'd probably be
Yeah.
like, I don't know what I'm.
it's hard. You kind of have to perform it or see it or speak it out loud. Kind of that's where it lives, really.
Yeah.
But so I did that, and I did that for a few years. I did that. I mean, I did that. It feels like I did that for the majority of my career. If you think about Game of Thrones was only uh was it 10 years ago now, 11 years ago when we first
Wow,
did
it's
the
hard
first
to believe
season.
it's this long. Yeah.
And we and up until then, that's what I did. I just performed doing theatre all over the country, sometimes opera.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't told you about that. I
You,
did.
But you.
Jonathan Miller just recently died. Jonathan Miller,
Oh,
who he recently died, and he was a very prolific theatre director and comedian. He worked with Dudley Moore and Peter Cook and Alan Bennett and these kind of people in Britain. But he turned into a really extraordinary director and did some fantastic operas, and employed me when I was quite young to work at the English National Opera. And all I was there to do was to learn the tango. But he liked me because I looked small and Argentinian, and he paired me with a very tall dancer, and I barely came up to her chest, you know. And I was kind of like the comedy relief, and I
fun.
and so I learned the tango. You know, like I was working with ballet dancers and trained dancers, and felt like a complete fraud because I was only there because I have this kind of tenuous ability to learn dance choreography.
Yeah.
I could not call myself a dancer, but I
Like,
worked my butt off, and I, you know, I was, you know, as I always do with kind of physical movement, I really put everything I had into it, and I really enjoyed it. And I ended up working at the English National Opera as a dancer for about 3 or 4 years. And every time I was involved in a production, I was like, one of these days, someone's going to come in and say, "What are you doing here? Why are you here? Can you please go?"
I don't think so. I mean,
so
you know, to
funny.
me, I think that you are a dancer because you
Yeah.
just have
I
an
had
ability.
I know, but I had terrible imposter syndrome because of all the people I was working with, and I realized that I wasn't really a dancer. I just worked really, really hard. That's all.
So how does a tango master go from being one of the imposters, as you call it, on stage for so many years to all of a sudden, let's put him now on a television series, Game of Thrones? Did they come to you? Did you see an audition? Was it from your agent? How did that kind of come about?
So I was really lucky because Nina Gold, who cast Game of Thrones, as well as, you know, things like Star Wars nowadays and pretty much every big TV show and movie, had been a friend of mine for many, many years. She had seen me doing fringe plays above pubs in you know, London, and remembered me. Uh, and always stayed in touch, always gave me auditions. When no one else was giving me auditions, she was the one calling me in for Mike Leigh movies and things that I would just never really normally get.
That's
Um,
Friend.
Yes.
and I was really lucky. But it's just that, you know, she was a young, upcoming casting director, and I was just so lucky to know her. But she did know everyone, and came in very useful, obviously, when it came to casting Game of Thrones, which needed such a huge British cast, um, and mostly newcomers. So she got in touch with my agent and said, could Miltos read for something? And the first role she gave me was Lord Varys to read, and I did it, and they didn't think I was right for it. Definitely not bald enough. Uh, as you can see.
Curly
And,
was
All right,
notified.
I'm gonna call Lord Varus.
and but they liked my audition, so they gave me another part, and that was for Syrio, and the rest is history. And then I just learned that introduction scene, 3.5 minutes long. It's a lot. It's a big scene to learn, for an
Yes.
audition.
It was a great
Uh,
scene. Great.
so
You were in a couple of scenes, weren't you?
Well, I
was
mean, the
just
whole-
thinking,
yeah,
Aria,
three, a
jousting.
whole 3 scenes. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's funny because way before we knew we were going to have you on the show. Of course, we're huge Game of Thrones fans, like millions of others. But the Game of Thrones, even if you like somebody, they're going to be evil at some point. You feel, and it's so funny when you know all of a sudden disappeared. We thought, oh no, he died defending her. He was the only really nice guy in the entire show that was just pure goodness, and they took him away. I remember we were actually highly upset when you died.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite movies when I was growing up was The Princess Bride. And
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if you've
I
seen
love that movie.
Yes, in my mind, I just think you would be fantastic, even better than the original.
Inigo Montoya.
Yeah, I'm an Inigo Montoya. You killed my brother.
No one can beat Mandy
I'm like,
Patinkin.
oh,
He is a legend.
Yeah.
He is, yes, he was great. I
But
love.
you know, the funny thing is that we even name checked him when we were doing the costume design for Syrio.
Really.
Yeah, the designer was like, look at these colors, like it's a bit Princess Bride. It's a bit like, I was like, yeah, okay. So it
great.
was in our minds when we were creating the character.
See, yeah.
That is.
I should be like a director or
you-
producer. I don't know,
Something
somewhere in
big.
there.
You
Yeah.
nailed it. Yeah. So that's right. So when you got the part, and I'm not discounting the fact you could do that. Yes. So we're just moving on now. When you got the part and went to actually shoot, did you engage with a lot of the crew, or was it very a small set for the scenes that you did compared to the actual bigness of the show?
We were very self-contained, of course, because all my scenes just involved me and Maisie. Apart from the first scene when all day poor old Sean Bean just had to watch me and Maisie doing our scene over and over again while standing in a doorway, and he was very gracious, because most of the time, people like that, you'd get someone else to step in. He was really gracious and very complimentary, and so I was very self-contained, just me and Maisie working together. But of course, the scene, especially that part of the story, was really important. And David and Dan, the creators and the writers, said, we're going to take our time over this because it's really important for what happens later. It's really important that this has a very strong resonance. So we're going to take all the time we need. And that was a really big deal because, of course, it's very rare to get the luxury of time whenever you're filming anything. And it was great because although the scene itself was very, very difficult and I suffered incredibly with nerves, and it was really one of the first things that anyone shot for any of Game of Thrones. So,
really?
so we were doing this scene, and it wasn't just the scene, it was the fact that we had to learn or remember this choreography. It's like rubbing your tummy and patting your head at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
It's like really difficult.
Because I'm just thinking, oh, whoops, I forgot that one. So
Yeah.
But we did it. We did film it over a number of days. I mean, it was at least 2 days we filmed it, and for 3.5 minutes, that you're doing it over and over and over and over again.
So
so by the end, we were actually we were remembering and all of that.
Yeah.
So, but it is nerve-wracking. It's really nerve-wracking because, of course, you want to do a good job, and knowing that you only have a limited amount of screen time, you have to bring a lot of stuff to the party, because you can't just rock up and just hope for the best. So I was very lucky that I got to work with a legendary fight choreographer called William Hobbs, who unfortunately died last year. But he was my mentor, and he was the man who cooked up the vocabulary of the water dance, and created the style of the water dance with me. And I have a lot to thank him for. He really was my Syrio Forel. He's like a man in his 80s. Really, like, he knew his stuff. He's choreographed most, things like the Duelists. The Duelists, Ridley Scott's very first film in the 70s with Harvey Keitel and Keith Carradine. and all the period dramas throughout that time from the 70s onwards.
Aw, that's really cool. Bless
That's
his
sweet.
soul.
Yeah, we could tell how he meant to you. You know, just
Yeah.
with your eyes.
Yeah, he was really, and I was really sad when he died last year. I mean, he was old, but but he was,
And he could
he
rock
he
it.
really was. I'll never forget the times working with him.
That's great.
Aw.
Now, on the sword battles with Macy, did she just really whack you a lot of times, or did you accidentally just let her have it once, accidentally?
No?
To this day, in the second scene where the scene that they wrote specially for the TV show that doesn't exist in the books, where I name check the god of death,
Uh-huh.
they gave me a sword which kind of had a wooden it had a wooden core in it, but it was made of rubber,
Mhm.
kind of firm rubber, so that I could whack her when I'm chastising her. And I don't know if anyone else notices it, but whenever I watch it, and I haven't seen it that much, but I remember watching it the first time going, I can see the tip of that sword wobbling. because obviously I had to really whack her.
A little blooper? A little inside
It's
blooper?
not a blooper. It's not a blooper. I just think if you don't know it happens, you don't notice it. But now I've told you, if you go back and see it, it kind of wobbles a little bit.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
and,
I'm definitely
but so I got to do the whacking. I don't think she didn't lay a finger on me,
Oh, wow.
even though she tried.
Did you get to keep the sword or anything from your shoot?
Not a single
No,
thing.
you didn't just
Not
get
even the broken bits of sword.
Oh,
They're really, really strict about things like that.
Oh, yeah, I guess they don't want it getting
And
out.
if anyone tells you that they got something from the show, they stole it.
yeah. Ross told me he had the whole White Walker costume, but I thought, kidding.
That's outrageous.
So have you heard the conspiracy theorists about the fact that you may not have actually died because no one saw you die and you were such a great swordsman? Our niece had brought that up from Australia, and they go, ask him because we still think he's alive.
Yes, I made the mistake of going on the forums and reading those theories. I mean, people led me there,
Oh, yeah,
everyone said, have you heard this and have you read this? And my curiosity got the better of me, and I did check it out. And they're all great. I mean, I think what it says a lot is how these the books have been around a long time, haven't they? Like a decade, maybe longer. No,
Yeah.
longer, maybe 2 decades now.
Mhm.
And I think the brilliant thing about writers who create these worlds is that it kind of stops belonging to them. I mean, we saw that with the backlash over the last season. It's like
Yeah.
suddenly the creators literally don't own it anymore. It's the fans who own it, and of course that means that they will have their theories about what happens. And what's interesting is that sometimes it feeds back. And I know that George has, I'm sure has followed some of the theories, or that the readers guessed some of the theories. But I think it's an interesting loop that is created, especially when it's, he's continually writing them. So, and he is very close to his fans. And before he became super famous, I remember in the very first season when we were shooting the show, he would turn up in Northern Ireland and kind of sit down in the basement of pubs in Northern Ireland, and his fans would come, and there'd be about 50, and they were the hardcore fans, and he'd kind of chat and drink. We'd have drinks, and could you imagine that happening now? I mean, it would do he just can't do that anymore, because you're going to have thousands and thousands of people turning up. But back then he was very much in touch with the fans, and talked about his books regularly, musings, and
How fascinating.
hot arguments about characters and what they do in the story. So that of course is not something that can happen anymore, but I'm sure he's completely connected to that still.
Now, what about for you? Can you still go out and, to the pubs and some
Yes, of course I can. I love the fact whenever I get given this question, I think it's also the fact that
Oh, it's
I'm
something that everyone asks.
completely unrecognizable.
Wow.
Every so often, someone will recognize me, and my fiance Holly will always throw her head into her hands
Oh,
and just go, "Can we please go now?"
she doesn't like it.
All we want to do is have a nice cup of coffee or a meal, and she's like, "Oh, not again."
I know you're gonna have to like dye your hair or come up with some sort, like you have a prosthesis on or something.
Yeah.
No, I don't need to do anything like that.
That's
I don't need to do anything like that.
funny. So, who recognizes you more, Game of Thrones fans or now Star Wars fans?
I had to tell I had to tell Holly that I was in Star Wars.
Oh,
You blink and you'll miss it. But no, Game of Thrones is the one that people really recognize me for.
So how was it being in Star Wars though, after having been in one iconic show
I
to
know that
another?
would seem a
It
little more
was
interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really exciting because obviously it was a dream come true to be kind of part of that kind of. I mean, the greatest part of the whole thing is when you go. Everything's in top secret, of course, so no one knows anything.
Hmm.
It's completely secret. You don't know what you're doing. No one tells you what you're doing. Don't tell you who you are. Um,
Wow.
I'm sure you obviously Daisy and John and all the principals knew what was going on, but
Hmm.
everyone else was under lock and key, and we were like, you're only going to get information when you absolutely need it. So for a long time, it was just. Well, we're just going to have to trust JJ and just make sure that we just turn up and get dressed when we need to get dressed and go to where we
Wow.
need to go, and then we'll be told what's going to happen. So that was kind of exciting and frustrating. But the best thing about it is when you go and you get your costume fitted for the first time, and you get to see what you're going to look like, because the design of it is where that's the most exciting part. The fact that scene with in Maz Kanata's castle, where you have hundreds of characters and aliens and droids from all over the galaxy, where you just you look around and it's a real built cantina, and everyone is populating it. It's not done with mirrors. It's literally everything there is practical and real. And you don't know whether there is a small person in a droid or whether it's an animatronic, or literally you just don't know. And it's really exciting. And then when the guys come in from the armory and they say, this is a selection of blasters. Which one do you think your character would use?
Oh
And you
my
get to choose. And it's like, that is the exciting part. That's the really exciting
Not only were you in Star Wars, you were in Star Wars.
Wow.
part. So it was that all of that was the exciting part. Yeah.
I
Oh,
just got chills. I would
oh
just love to
yeah.
go to the cantina.
I grew
Love
up
to
playing
see
Star
that.
Wars toys, my favorite toys growing up, and now I'm thinking, okay, you actually get to become one of those action figure, guy. Yeah, that is it. They need an action figure of you.
Yes,
That's what they
they
need.
do.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was that felt really exciting.
Oh, how
Oh,
amazing. So again, so the career doesn't stop just because we watch your shows now. What are you working on now or plan to work on in the future that you're really excited about?
So I have I tell you what, I'm really excited to see. I got to have a really exciting experience working with Samuel L. Jackson on the sequel to The Hitman's Bodyguard last year.
Oh my
Just the
goodness.
end. I think it was in the summer, and obviously the movie's going to come out next year. And I get to play a character who tries to take out Samuel Jackson's character. Uh,
that's cool.
there'll be. I won't be giving you any. There's no spoilers in saying that it doesn't go well, but I try, and getting to do a couple of scenes with him was a real. I felt that's it now. I better just retire because I think I've done everything I need to do. I've been called a motherfucker by Samuel Jackson.
Is like curse words across the
That would be my ringtone then.
Yeah.
You know, if he did that to me, that would be my ringtone.
I know.
Oh
So
my
so that's good. I'm very excited about that coming out. And the rest is a mystery and a secret. I'm currently, jumping through hoops trying to get another job, which kind of feels close but also very far away. But I don't like to kind of talk about it until everything is, until there's anything completely concrete, because it feels like otherwise I'll curse it. But that's an exciting thing to look forward to. Yeah.
Can't wait. That gives us an excuse to revisit back now in the future to find out what you have been working on now. That's a secret. Yes. And the last thing is, this is a section, a new section for us that we like to call Name Drop. And we like to find out, we don't need the phone number, but who is the most famous person to contact that is in your telephone?
Oh my God.
Samuel Jackson?
That's what I was wondering.
No, I didn't get his telephone number. Oh God, that's a really good one. To be honest, it's not a actor. It's directors. It's like Justin and Nick Murphy. Nick Murphy, who is the director of the new version of Christmas Carol, which I'm sure will be out on, is it PBS, where you get a lot of BBC dramas? Yes. That's this Christmas, with Guy Pearce playing Scrooge, a new version by Stephen Knight, who created Peaky Blinders. Nick Murphy has directed that. He's a dear friend of mine. Excellent director. Justin Chadwick, excellent director of the Nelson Mandela movie with Idris Elba, and so those are my claim to fame.
Well, those are really,
and they're more important than actors, because
you get that right.
Yeah, those are ones you want on your speed dial.
Yeah, you got that right. So, well, good. Well, now,
and then, what about because Ross Mullen made it a point that we missed that. One of the big questions.
Yes, so looking back, I'm so glad you asked that.
Yeah.
I know you said, hey, you made it whenever you started getting paid to act, and 250 pounds a week. Lily! We're almost
dog is completely upstaging me. I know why, because he's hungry. It's actually dinner time. This is him trying to go.
Oh, okay.
We won't keep you too much longer.
We're wrapping up.
It's okay. It's really okay. It's really okay. I'm glad he got in the shot.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He'll be the next star. Was there one audition or role that you came so close to that you may not have gotten, that you thought, okay, I thought that was my big break, turned out not to be? But was there anything like that, looking back on your career so far? Or you
just basically just took off?
The most current one, which I cannot tell you about. That is the one.
Dang it!
Unfortunate is the one, and I'm so sorry that I can't tell you about it, because but that is the one. Yeah,
we will revisit with you in the future to find out all about this one.
Watch this space. Yeah,
wonderful. Well, Miltos, thank you so much for being on. You've been such a delight. We've had a wonderful time with you and Lindy.
Yes, and say goodbye to your precious little one.
Yeah, he's now Holly's now feeding him, so he's happy.
That's good. That's good.
Well, tell Holly thank you so much for letting us steal so much of your time. Yes. And hopefully
she just said that's okay.
Thanks, Holly. We owe you one.
Yeah.
Or she owes us.
It was really lovely to talk to you. It was great fun.
That was fun. Miltos was fun. As good as advertised.
Yes.
He advertised that he was lots of fun.
He was.
And he was right, yeah. Yeah. But how neat, though, that he goes to Star Wars. That is almost every Star Wars fan's dream, probably, is to get to be in Star Wars.
Yeah.
How could you imagine coming up? Which kind of blaster do you think your character would be using? I'd still want to keep that blaster. It'd be tucked underneath my shirt.
I think he probably secretly did keep something. He just wasn't going to say he stole it.
That's right. That's why he was at Holly's house and not his, because he probably has Game of Thrones and Star Wars memorabilia everywhere.
Yeah.
We caught you, Miltos. We know what you're up to.
He probably has the big throne.
And I am really excited now to see him as a bad guy in the new Hitman movie with Samuel L.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
One of my
that's
all-time favorite
awesome.
actors, though.
Yeah.
I gotta figure out what the L stands for.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Lee.
Big fan of Miltos. So glad we had him on the show. And I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did,
Yeah.
because we had a lot of fun.
We did.
Yeah, it was great. So hopefully we'll have him on again someday to talk about the big break almost that he couldn't talk about because he said he didn't want to jinx it.
Yes. Yes. Gosh, it was
I'm racking my brain thinking what that is.
I know, right? But we're never gonna get it. We're never
No.
gonna get it.
So we're gonna have to
So-
follow up with him again to see if he gets it.
I do hope he gets the part. Although a little piece of me actually is like hoping he doesn't, so they can come back and tell us what he is. Is that wrong?
Yeah, no. It's not wrong to be selfish at all. That's why we're here. We're pulling for you, Miltos. So anyway, thank you guys for joining us. Had a blast. Hope you're with us next week, and we will do it all over again with a brand new guest. My big break almost. See you then.